Well, dear friends, it's a true pleasure and privilege to gather here this evening for a theme that touches the very heart of healing. Before we turn to the historical background, I would like to begin by welcoming you all with warmth and deep appreciation. In August 1914, at the beginning of the World War I, Rudolf Steiner offered 4 lectures on emergency aid and spiritual support. These lectures introduced healing mantras that illuminate the spiritual and psychological dimension of wound healing. They speak not only about physical injury, but about every form of trauma. For Steiner, compassion was understood and as an expansion of consciousness and necessary inner movement for the spirit to advance the evolution of humanity. In his final lecture, he describes the human capacity to cultivate peace, an ability to profound that it is honored by a choir of spiritual beings. Tonight, we're honored to welcome Rolf Heine, who will guide us on Steiner's lectures on wounds and trauma, shedding lights on his historical context and its powerful relevance for the challenges of our own time. Rolf Heine is a nurse and a coordinator of International Forum of Anthroposophic Nursing within the medical section at the Goetheanum. In over more than 30 years at the Fielder Clinic in Germany, he was devoted himself to anthroposophic nursing, teaching worldwide, and contributing through books and articles to the deepening of the field. Rolf, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nurit, for the invitation. And yes, I heard a bit about this initiative to have these monthly meetings in order to keep a community, to support each other, and to listen to each other, sharing concerns and the situation that is all over the world, challenging, but especially in Israel. And I think Israel can be regarded as a focus point on which the situation of the whole world is reflected. So when I was in Israel, now it's about 15, 20 years ago, I had the deep impression that this country has something important to do with the memory of the world and history. And so I'm really happy to share with you these things that are somehow from a historical perspective, because it was Rudolf Steiner who talked about wounds, trauma, pain, and how to overcome it. And he talked about it in a really, one could say, in an emergency situation, not only for those who were directly involved in this conflict of the First World War when it started in 1914, but also for the whole anthroposophic community that was in the well-protected Switzerland, in Dornach, near Basel, this little village, the hill in that time with the place where the first Goetheanum had been built or was about to be built. The foundation stone of the first Goetheanum was laid 1.5 years before that incident at the hill over Dornach in Switzerland. And I will start with this historical perspective and want to share some pictures also about it to give you a bit of an impression of it. Of course, these are all pictures that you might already know, but we'll see. Yeah, so this was in February 1914. So we can see that the first Goetheanum was just under construction, and the other picture was a few months later. And we saw that there was a big progress in the building of this Goetheanum, and it was not only a project on architecture, it was not only a project on art, it was really a big social project as well. It was a social project because in this place, under the workers of the Goetheanum, there were also not only Swiss people from the local community, but also people from all over the world, especially artists and those who were very excited about the anthroposophic project of connecting people and forming a worldwide community of spiritually thinking and acting people. And so from many nations, people were at the Goetheanum and working at this place, also artists crafting wood and later on painting. And then at the end of July, it became very obvious that there will be a war in Europe. Everybody all over these countries was somehow expecting this war. Why? The political situation between these nations and their imperialisms, they were that tight and without any obvious possibility for a further future, that everybody thought, or many people, the majority of people thought that only a war could bring clarity in this situation. So even the intellectuals in many countries, from Russia, France, England, Germany, were expecting this war as a thunderstorm to bring clarity into our world. And this was, of course, that huge illusion, we know, from more than 100 years later, can see. And of course, people met this disaster when this war did not end after a few months as it was expected to end. So at the beginning, at the end of July, 1st of August, when the war was declared to Russia and France, then all the men, especially the men who were at the building of the first Goetheanum, they had to go back to their countries, joining the military service in these countries. And only few stood back. And these were especially women. But also the atmosphere amongst them was not just friendly. Now they had been working together for months, sometimes for years. And now all these nationalities and nationalisms within the souls of people, they came up. And so the atmosphere was also under some tension. And I think this was the deepest tragedy for many people at this place, and maybe even for Rudolf Steiner, was that this project that also was intended to be a model for peace, that people from different languages, different nations, different ethnics could really stay together with a common goal, connected with a spirit, that even directing the wills towards the spirit could save, could protect even people from war. So it was also a peacekeeping project, this first Goetheanum. And when then the war started and the fires could be heard from Dornach, because the German border is just about 7-8 kilometers away, and the French border as well. So in this triangle of countries, the first war activities started, and one could hear the cannon fire, and one could see the explosions from the hill of the Goetheanum towards the north. And it was depressing for many peoples at this place to see that the vision of peacekeeping, of a model of how people from different nations could collaborate in freedom and peace, that this project failed. Even from a spiritual aspect, it was the question, has it failed? And then Rudolf Steiner decided, in this critical social situation, in this depressed situation, to invite those workers at the Goetheanum for 4 courses or 4 lectures, even courses, from the 13th of August, immediately 2 weeks after the beginning of the war, until the 16th. And he offered a course, now not about a theoretical thing, how does the war came upon and what can we do to keep peace? No, it was very practical, a course about wound healing, emergency in trauma, in wound dressing, wound healing. So nowadays we would call it a first aid course. This was what he offered. And there was a woman, a doctor, physician, originating from the Ukraine. She was Jewish, in fact. And she was the physician to give the practical parts of this course. And Rudolf Steiner then, after the practical part, gave some insights from a spiritual aspect into wound healing and into, yes, let's say, the power of the spirit to overcome this disaster, and to overcome anxiety. Because anxiety always arises when there is danger, and especially if you do not feel any option to act. To be paralyzed by not being able to do something. And therefore it's so wise really to make and to offer something very practical, hands-on, yes, something meaningful, with the direction of the topic of the issue of this war. Yes, and then after these lectures were in this critical situation, and therefore they were not well reported. There were only a few notes taken, a few people taking notes, and they were collected in the 1980s, I think, in these Beiträge to the Rudolf Steiner collection. And it is called The Secret of the Wounds, Notes from the Samaritan Course. And on the left side, you can see Henriette Ginder Friedkin, this anthroposophic physician, and you can see the Goetheanum in the background. And she was the one who did this course, this practical part of the course. And it was Peter Selk to discover her biography or parts of her biography. And he found that she, after the war, went to France and then was kept by the Gestapo in 1943 and deported to Auschwitz, where she died on February the 13th. And so this is really also, she is one of the two anthroposophic physicians that were killed in the Nazi concentration camps in the 40s. So this course is really something to our heart, and I think it's in even this sense closely connected with Israel and maybe even the situation of trauma, which is a worldwide theme, and how to overcome trauma by both very practical aspects, hands-on, trauma, emergency pedagogic, but also, and I will talk about it briefly, with touching, massage therapies, but also with art therapy, with a lot of the tools that anthroposophic medicine and therapies and nursing can provide. I want to start now not with the first mantra, with the first lecture, which had been about wounds and wound healing. I want to come to the question of healing wounds after I could show you some of, or the second mantra, which is about pain. Pain, let's say the mental aspect of a wound, or even we also have wounds in our souls. Our souls are wounded by maybe the shock of a physical wound, traumatization in our soul by a physical injury, but also the wound that can be caused because of the way how humanity, human beings are treated in an inhuman way. To find that what a human being is not respected. This is not only an attack against an individual. We can easily feel that any attack against a human being is also an attack against humanity. And therefore it concerns any human being. And to destroy the image of what is human, to destroy even the archetype of humanity and what could be, what is the potential of a human being. To destroy that, this applies to all sides of those who use war for their conflicts. And so, a mental wound can also be regarded as or has an aspect of being a spiritual wound. Because what happens if in a world we distinguish the nature, the essence of what is human into races or nations, cultures, ethnics, gender, whatever? So this all that could be regarded as pain, physical pain, mental pain, and spiritual pain. And now Rudolf Steiner explains that we used to experience pain in our own body. Yes, this is something not very spectacular. Yes, this is very natural. We experience pain when we have a wound in ourselves. And now Rudolf Steiner is not talking how to overcome this pain. He says that we only will gain spiritual power to overcome pain if we extend our ability to perceive pain. So it is not to reduce and to avoid pain, but to extend our ability to stand, to perceive pain not only in ourselves, but also in another person, in another individual. This is very astonishing because in pain, we are very much focused on our own body. One could say, and please forgive me if it is an extreme expression, but you might understand it. Pain makes us very egoistic. In pain, we are focused that much on ourselves that we even cannot move our consciousness from our gallbladder or our tongue or a wound. So now, of course, it is nothing to tell somebody who is in pain, you should extend your pain. You should, or say, your pain is only relative to the pain of others. Of course not. This is totally inhuman. But as those who experience somebody in pain, we could consider, is it possible to overcome, to soothe pain when we extend our perception and if we get able, if you make us able to perceive the pain of the other. This is normally that what we call compassion. But compassion is sometimes not maybe that what Steiner in this case means. In many cases we feel compassion because the pain of the other reminds us on our own pain. This is what we can easily understand. It's human somehow. But then we do not feel the pain of the other, but our own pain, and this might be in resonance with the pain of the other. But what would it be if a human being would be able to transcend these limits of our own consciousness and extend our consciousness to the feeling, to the pain of another person? And in this perspective, Steiner says, only in this perspective we can experience what humanity is. We can even experience only then what kind of development is needed for human beings to become real human beings. Or in the Christian understanding, to understand the mission of the Christ, to become human beings. And this is the mantra that Rudolf Steiner gave for pain. So long as you feel the pain, which I am spared, Christ is unrecognized as he works in the world being. For weak remains the spirit when it is only capable of feeling the suffering of its own body. If you look on the structure of these words, of this mantra, of these words, we find this first two sentences very strange. To perceive that there is pain in the world, but that I am spared for some time, or thankfully for most people, the most time of their life, we are spared from pain, which is in the world as a world power. And as long as I am only able to perceive my own body in pain, but not the pain that is working in the world, if my consciousness is limited to that, we will not be able to perceive the essence of healing. Now, the question could be, how can we transform our soul in a way that it becomes sensitive, perceptive to the pain of others? How can we develop a sense organ for the pain of others? From our own experience, one could say that we need experience of pain in our own biography, with physical pain, with suffering, and maybe even with guilt as an expression of spiritual pain. So without the perception of pain on ourselves, we hardly can develop a sense for the pain of others. This means pain can be transformed into a sense organ. And this is the question, how this can happen. How can pain become a sense organ? And as I tried to describe it before, as long as we are suffering from a wound, we are only reminded on our own wound, seeing the wounds of others. Yes, you know that if one talks about his complaints and then the other talks about his complaints, her complaints, this is not really a helpful dialogue. So it's not only to remind the own wound, but to remember how this own wound has been healed. So only the wound healing process in ourselves and somehow the closing of the wound by its healing processes, this makes us able to develop a sense organ. We know that the eye and the ears, all our senses, they had been developed out of wounds. There must be light on our skin to create an eye. There must be sound on a resounding membrane to make us ears. So any sense organ comes from a wound, but from a wound that is somehow healed. So for transforming a wound into a sense organ, it needs to be healed, and we need to describe the healing process. And then it is not only needed that the wound is closed. A wound can also be closed as a scarf. And then it is either hypersensitive or without sensation. Now I come to the first mantra, which is about wound healing. Before Rudolf Steiner gave this mantra, he explained what is happening in a wound from a spiritual aspect. And he said, when the skin is open, when there is a wound and bleeding starts, then in the wound we have not our own etheric qualities, our own life qualities. When the skin is open, then in this wound takes place what he calls the general life process, a general life process. That means a life process that exists out of our body, which is part of the life processes all over the world, on the planet, wherever there is life. And this general life force started to take place in our womb.
And I dare to say, said PhD Marco.
And then Steiner says, against this general life process, the wound wakes up and stimulates what he calls the white blood cells that has been discovered a few years before Steiner was talking about them. The white blood cells make their way towards the wound to overcome the general life process and to individualize the wound again. And then he added that this movement of the white blood cells is a conscious process, or a process that is stimulated by consciousness. From the anthroposophic point of view, we can understand, yes, white blood cells, they can move like amebas, so they can move. They can even digest. So they are a bit animal-like. So they have a very close relationship to our astral. They are somehow the expression of the astral in our immune system. And now Steiner says that at the moment in the human development, only a wound can stimulate the migration of the leukocytes, the white blood cells, towards the wound. But in the future, it will be possible that human beings, out of their consciousness, can start this process. But this would mean an enhancement of our consciousness forces. Now it's very interesting to follow the most recent research on psychoimmunology, which clearly shows that in stress, for example, that stress is a very astral thing, that in stress, leukocytes are stimulated, but in chronic stress, they are reduced, of course, as we know. And this opens a very, very clear perspective, even from the side of natural science, of neuroimmunology, that consciousness plays an important role in the wound healing process. There's a lot of research nowadays that shows that in stress, the wound healing is low. In depression, we have low wound healing. And this means also that the ability for healing a wound is much bigger if you not only look on a proper technique of cleansing the wound and wound management, but also to care for the mental aspects of it. So healing the mental trauma in a wound, or the mental trauma, has a positive effect on the physical wound healing as well. Yes, now I come to this verse that he gives after the explanation that I try to give now. Well up, O blood, and in the welling work, quickening muscles, quicken the seeds. May loving care of a warming heart be healing breath. This mantra is very effective, really, one could say effective, if you speak it in case of a bleeding wound, but not only in a bleeding wound, we can also say in any acute wound. And we see, even in the first reading, that it is not easy to understand, that it has a double meaning. Well up, O blood. If you have an imagination, most people think of the blood as a source, as a fountain, even a fountain of blood. But the double meaning of welling, and especially in the German word Quelle, quellen, it means also to coagulate. So welling is a process of the blood in flow, but it's also the process of blood in coagulating, in forming. These are the both possibilities of the blood. The blood can flow and cleanse, and it can close the wound in coagulation. So we have this double meaning of a process, and this is not easy to think both processes at the same time. And if something is not easy to think because it does not follow our imaginations that we are used to have, then our thinking becomes independent, more independent from the images we always carry with us. And this is exactly the situation in which we are when we see a bleeding wound. There are not few people who can't see blood without losing their consciousness. Because we are experiencing something where the blood loses its form and it is dissolving, and we follow with our consciousness, and it needs some force, some strength to keep our consciousness aware, not falling into, yes, a short coma. Then we have this quickening muscles, quicken the seeds. Even the word seeds has a double meaning. The seeds can be regarded as the germs of the microbes in the wound. the general life process, or it could be the seed of something new, the seed of the growing, the proliferation in the wound. Then the rest of the mantra is easy to understand. This is what comes, what can be given by the human being that is caring for the wound. May loving care of a warming heart be healing breath. That breath can heal. That breath is that one that enlivens the death. Enlivens and ensouls the physical substance. I want to go through the wound healing process step by step in this verse. We have the welling up of blood, which is in the wound healing process, cleansing and closing the wound. And in the welling work, we have the gesture, the working gesture of proliferation, which is an etheric quality, the quality of growth. Quickening muscle, a muscle that is moving, that quickens, that is agile, that is astral forming. If we only have proliferation processes, it could even be that the tissue is growing beyond the surface of the skin. So in the epithelialization, in the closing of the wound, in the skin forming at the end of the wound healing process, we have this astral forming. Quicken the seeds can be regarded as the astral, or if the of the eye that is cold, the eye that brings back integration, that integrates the wound that had been healed into the whole body. The eye itself is a seed. The eye is that in us that can develop. May loving care, this could be regarded as the transformation of the astral. Now we come not only from a natural wound healing process, but it becomes meaningful that there is care. Wounds and wounded humans, they call the soul. They call other human beings. This could be regarded as the transformation of the astral, that if it is not transformed, only looks on itself. Of a warming heart, warmth, air, water, substance. These are the qualities of the elements and the etheric. So the etheric proliferation can be regarded as transformed, becomes warm, even radiating warmth. And the healing breath could be regarded as the transformation of the physical. Transformation means, yes, even maybe this transformation of the healed wound into a sense organ. If we regard that in terms of a mental trauma, before that I just go through the 7 life processes. Yes, these are the 7 life processes that Rolf Steiner describes in many times. So the first process is the breathing process, then we have the warming process, digesting process, excreting, maintaining, growing, and reproducing process. And we can find these qualities that he connects with the 7 planets. We can find these qualities of the life processes in the reverse way in that breathing we find here, warming we find here, digesting we find here, and so on. So if you put the signs of the planets into this series, it becomes visible how the wound healing process can be regarded as the re-establishing of life processes. Now, with regard on a mental trauma, we can also find in this verse the concept of a modern trauma or emergency trauma therapy. When somebody has a wound, when somebody was shot, had an accident, whatever, or a trauma from, yes, something horrible he saw, then the first thing we do is to protect this individual from that place. We have to turn him away. We have to bring him to another place, to a safe place. So this protecting gesture that we have in also the wound coagulation, which protects the wound, this is needed as a first emergency measure. And whenever it's possible, the one should speak. And many people with a trauma, they repeatedly tell what they see. And this is actually like the flow of blood, something that can cleanse the mental wound. Give him or her the possibility to speak, to speak, to speak, to speak in a protected area. Then we know that our etheric body is a timely structure, a timely body. The etheric exists in processes and time. And for any kind of wound healing, these are mental wounds, spiritual wounds, and physical wounds. They need time. And time is a very strong healer, can be a very strong healer. So we must give people with a trauma time. And we know a bigger physical wound needs at least 1 year. And sometimes a mental wound needs this period of 7 years in which a specific state of or rhythm of mental development happens in our biography. We know that clearly from biography work, that every 7 years we change also the theme of our biography. Then, as a third measure or goal in trauma therapy, is gaining strength and coping strategies to avoid re-traumatization. It is not about to work on the trauma, on the wound itself, but it is to gain an inner stability as much as this is possible. And therefore, all kinds of arts, all kinds of crafts, of working, of being creative, also coming back to a, whatever that means, normal life. This can form such a position that grows independent from the wound. And to enhance, to foster that independent, healthy element, that strengthening the I quality beside, if not beyond, the trauma. This is a third step in trauma therapy. We can also talk about nursing procedures or medical procedures in this meaning. We have at the first hand what we call surgery in many cases, and wound dressing, wound cleansing, and as a remedy that is most important for, especially for the acute wound, this is arnica. And you can give arnica not only in a physical wound, you can also give arnica in a D6 as a homeopathic remedy in mental wounds, in a shock, as an emergency treatment. Then this process of wound healing, this to give time, could also say to support the general health forces. And therefore, in a chronic wound, also in a super infected wound, you can also always think on a treatment of the liver. For example, with a yarrow liver compress or an oxalis liver compress. Very effective in supporting the general life forces, individualized life forces. Yes, gaining strength and coping strategies. This is, in this case, it's most important. All kinds of touch. That you can feel the healthy parts of your body. Your inner stability in touch. Touch that is respecting your own boundaries. Touch that is allowed and that you can control. That you can control somebody who puts his or her hand on your back. And you can say, yes, I feel your warmth. I feel my warmth under your hand. Or you could say, this is too much. Please leave this part of my body. Leave your hands somewhere in the periphery. You may stay with me, but at the moment I can't tolerate touch. So all this path between distance and intimity, this gives forms this strength and is a most important coping strategy. And then, as a fourth stage, it is to look at the trauma. When we are found some inner stability, we can look on what has happened. And now we should not only look on what has happened, but with the perspective of what could be a seed for the future. The eye has not only the past. The eye has not only presence. The eye always needs for its own health and nature, future. So this is one of the critical moments in trauma therapy, or even also in a situation of if a cancer patient if a woman lost her breast in a breast cancer operation, to face the wound, to have a look on that place. This is an important step, and it needs to define the right time when that can happen. And this should be, of course, the patient to define. Now we start with the transformation. And in many wounds, this transformation does not happen. And because it has to go through the eye, all these transformation processes, they are totally free. Nobody is requested or forced to do these steps. But in our experience, we found that a deeper healing, and especially the transformation of a wound into a sense organ for others, into a sense organ for our own biography and the biography of others, and also for humanity. It needs these transforming steps. The transformation of the astral can be regarded as to overcome the concept of being a victim. Yes, a traumatized person is a victim, but not only. And only if I find the possibilities within myself to be active and not only reacting on what the trauma is demanding, what the wound is demanding, but if I'm able to find a life that is beyond that wound, that can integrate the wound, but it is not me. The wound is not me. And I am not only a victim. To overcome the concept of being a victim is an important step of transformation. And the next step that only can be done totally out of a free will is forgiving. We know this is a very, very difficult concept, especially if it is regarded as something that should be or should happen. And in this form of a demand or a request, it is not true. But in so many cases, we find that this gesture of forgiving was essential for people who suffered from a trauma or who are in a process of being constantly suppressed and treated and badly treated. And then this transformation of the physical, this can be regarded that the wound become perceptive for the pain. And this is what we know from people who were going through a trauma, through a traumatic episode of their life, or that even could regard their whole biography or the major of their biography as struggling. But sometimes at the end, they were able to bless. The ability to bless has something to do with the transformation of the physical. Our physical is, if we follow Rudolf Steiner, our body of hope. And when at the end of our life, or when in the transformation of the physical, these hope forces become body free, when these hope forces are not only connecting the parts of our physical body, but if they become free, then they can become the hope for others, the hope for those who will come after us, behind us. So this process of transformation is also a process of awakening our consciousness. It is the process that we in the future become more and more the possibility to heal wounds out of consciousness forces and to transform our soul to a sense organ for the needs of others, for the wounds of others. The wounds belong to us. Women know that very well. Every month, a wound. For 20 to 30 years, every month a wound, a bleeding wound that is healed. And I think just having menses can give women this inner wisdom of constant healing. And this kind of healing makes us able to give, to create a new living being. So this is more difficult for men who sometimes experience the healing process only on physical wounds we have. We need wounds to develop. We need to be vulnerable. If we are not vulnerable, we are not receptive. Nothing new can come in the world if we do not leave our stable position. We cannot even walk. Walking means always coming from a stable position into a vulnerable position, in moving one leg, in lifting one leg. We couldn't move if we would not bring ourselves in an unstable condition. We need that vulnerability. But on the same time, if you would only be vulnerable, if you would only be a wound, if there would only be possibilities for development, we could not exist. We also need the inner uprightness, the inner form that works against the wound, that is a healing process, and this is what we call resilience. And as human beings, we need resilient vulnerability. We need the wound. And on the other hand, the deep feeling that we are beloved. Love, feeling beloved is the most important factor of resilience. You know about the work of Aaron Antonovsky about salutogenesis, and this is all about these factors that make us resilient. And I don't want to go into the details of this question, what is resilient vulnerability? For me, it's important to understand that we need both inner strength and vulnerability. And there's something very beautiful where we can experience this. We need, for any kind of development, openness. And on the same time, we need our experience or the results of experience. And both together openness and knowing from the past that comes together in thinking. So to observe thinking will be a meditative possibility to understand what is resilient vulnerability. I come to the third mantra that Rudolf Steiner has given in this summer-written course. In the first, it was about wound healing. In the second, about the pain of the other and our possibility to transcend our limitation of feeling pain. And the third mantra is about, we could also say, prevention, or what can we learn from the fact that there is violence, that there are wounds. How can we overcome all these conflicts that hit us, that creates suffering? And this was the fourth lecture he gave, and at the end he gave this mantra that is also not easy to understand. I try to explain it. First read it and I try to explain it. You spirit of my earthly place, unveil the light of our age to the Christ endowed soul, that striving it may find you in the choir of the spheres of peace, resounding with the praise and power of human hearts devoted to the Christ. I did it in a bit different translation. This makes it, from my understanding, more understandable. The spirit of my earthly place. This is, and Rudolf Steiner talked about it before the First World War, when he talked about the missions of the different people's souls. And the spirit of the earthly place, this is the spirit that is community building around us. Community building spirits. And they are different. They have even different missions. And we have to know the mission of our communities in which we live and which we are expressing our individual missions. We should understand the nature of this spirit and the nature of a spirit can be called the age of a spirit. And now this mantra says that the spirit of this community building spirit may help the striving soul to find this spirit. And then the striving soul may find the choir of those spirits, of those different communities. These spirits are working together. They are not fighting against each other as we human beings do. They are deeply not only collaborating, they are in a choir. They perform something together. They perform a concert. They perform celestial music. And this is a choir of peace. The choir of these spiritual beings are creating harmonies, the harmonies of the spheres. And this is a harmony of peace. But what is this core choir singing? What is the content of these harmonies? What is the message of the lyrics they sing? And now, this is totally astonishing. They are singing about the human being. They sing that the human being and praise the human being. That the human beings are the ones carrying the power to keep peace. The human being itself has its capability to create peace when it is devoted to the archetype of humanity, if there is an image of the I and humanity. So what are the peacekeeping capacities of every human being that strives for this, for humanity, for this archetype of humanity? And for the ending of this presentation, I want to mention these very simple human abilities. It's nothing very spectacular, it's just human. That we can listen and talk, that we can exchange. Especially sometimes we have to learn to listen more than to talk, but also talking in the right way can be an art. And listening is an art. But this is what we have as human beings. And then second thing, this is what we had been talking about. This is compassion and the possibility to be in resonance with nature, but especially with other human beings. Nowadays, many people say there is no truth. Everybody has its own truths, so we are isolated. And we cannot know what is happening in another. Yes, this is true. In this concept, we only make assumptions what the other could think or feel, especially when we are not asking, then we make assumptions. But we have the possibility of understanding because we can come into resonance with each other. And as third, very human ability, an ability that angels do not have. Angels make no compromises. Therefore, they are not human. But as humans, we can make a compromise. And the compromise is not what we nowadays call a win-win situation. The compromise is the feeling that a decision that we make is the best decision if the other can develop and I can develop best because of the compromise. Because we do not only need the other, we do not only want to justice to the other, we know that we need the other in his differences. And this is a good understanding to make a compromise. And the compromise, we know, is not forever. A compromise needs to be cared for as any friendship. And I want to finish with something I found recently about resonance. To come into an inner resonance has 4 aspects. And these 4 aspects, they were outlined by a German sociologist called Hartmut Rosa. And he says, resonance comes about first if we are attracted by something. We must be interested in something, and we need to hear the call of something. Hearing the call. And he gives a beautiful example. If you live in the mountains, yes, then you can hear the call of the mountains. Or if you have a nice park around you or somewhere, or you have the desert and you can hear the call of the desert. Something attracts you. So hearing that call is a first step in resonance. But then there's another thing that is needed to come into resonance, and this is that we have the possibility to move to the desert, to the mountains, to the park, or that we have, if we hear a call, if we hear the expression of a need, that we even can do something. If somebody asks us to give something, if we feel our ability to give, to donate, to help. And in helping, in giving, we feel ourselves efficient. Therefore, helping or giving is better than receiving. Yes, because we feel self-efficacy. And then a third factor for gaining resonance is that if we are in an interaction with the other, we are transforming not only ourselves, but also the other transforms. In any kind of encounter is so far, let's say, dangerous, because in any encounter we will transform a bit. Hopefully in a positive way and not in a hardening way. But transformation is needed to be a resonant individual. And the fourth quality that Hartmut Rosa mentions is indeterminacy. That means we cannot plan it. If you listen to a beautiful music, you cannot plan it that you will enjoy it, even if it is your favorite music. Sometimes even this most beloved person around you says nothing. This means there is also in the other, even if it is nature or another human being, of course, there is freedom. It is not to be determined. So this is Hartmut Rosa, Resonance, a sociology of world relations. Beautiful book. I want to finish now. And thank you very much for listening, and excuse me that I talked longer than I expected to talk.
Thank you so much, Rolf. If it's okay, maybe we'll find some minutes for small questions or expression of thanks from the audience. Is it okay for you?
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay. So I invite you, please.
I can say that your lecture, your words resonate in me in a deeply way. I think from my perspective, we are struggling here in Israel a way to understand suffer and to work with it, not only our suffer, but the suffer of the other, of my friends, of my enemy. And for me, you gave us a direction, possibility. So I really thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, yes, this is, yeah. It was a gift for me to trying to talk about these things. Yes.
I wanted to say something, if it's okay, Norit.
Yes, of course.
About the 7 healing processes of the wound. The etheric process of time, you say when there is an acute trauma, person is out of time. And one of the first things that we try to do in acute trauma is build the time of the event, to put him back in the time, not allow him to freeze. Yeah, so this is also more in the acute phase. It was very beautiful to hear about this. And also with the eye for the future, this a lot of the time I feel there's a search for the meaning. So in order for the future to activate the eye, you look for the meaning. True, and then you can move forward if you find how to grow from this. So it's the eye forces there. So thank you. It was very beautiful perspective of the lectures. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, for me it's very important exactly at that time when we or at that point when we speak about meaning of suffering, when we speak about transformation, when we speak about overcoming the position of being a victim, that this only can happen if it is totally free. And we cannot request it. But to create the possibility of it, therefore we need, as therapists, we need that knowledge. Yeah. Thank you for, yes, even to go into the depth and the details of therapy, trauma therapy. Thank you.
Someone else? You can unmute yourself. Yes, please, Leora.
First, I really enjoyed it, and it was very interesting in putting things together, as you put it, with physical trauma and the mental trauma. And with much of the trauma we see, if there is a shock, there is a dismembering of the bodies. And with this mantra, you're calling for the eye, and you're using the eye of the therapist. And be able to sense and feel and resonate of the therapist with the eye of the therapist, to call the eye of the person, to try to start the healing. And I really loved how you put it, and I thought of this as part of it.
So thank you so much for your depth and clarity and humanity you brought into this evening. Your insight open space for renewed compassion and the understanding in our work, and remind us that healing is not only clinical act, but a moral and spiritual gesture towards the human being. So we are grateful for your presence and for your healing impulse, and you continue to carry, into the world. And thank you for guiding us tonight with such wisdom and warmth. May this work continue to inspire us in our daily practice. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Nurit. Thank you, everybody, and all the best, for you and your country and the world. Thank you.